Welcome to part 3 of my complete bow build. This is going to be arrow rest setup. So we're going to go right from, having never opened the arrow rest to having it on your bow, center shot, leveled, everything ready to paper tune essentially. If you've been following along this series, you might notice that I haven't timed my bow yet. The reason for that is that after a string change, I like to put a few shots through my new strings before I do the timing, just to help them settle out in the cam tracks. So obviously you need your arrow rest on for that. So at this point, I've changed my strings. I've set our nocking point. I've put on knock sets above and below where the knock will sit, and I've put on the D-loop. So the next step so that we can actually shoot the bow is going to be to put on the arrow rest. So on this new Bowtech Carbon 1, you can use what they call the integrate mounting system, which is a new system which basically allows you to mount your arrow rest via a dovetail mount, which is kind of a cool idea. You can also use the traditional burger buttonhole mounting method that's been used for decades. I'm going to do it with the integrate system here because this is my first bow that's had that system, but I'll break down how to do it in both ways. So here I've got from our friends at Vapor Trail Archery, I got the GI8X, the Gen Integrate X series. This is a top of the line arrow rest. I've used the Vapor Trail rests for a lot of years, back to the Pro V, which I had on some of my first bows before I did any work for anybody else, and they're bulletproof. They have a great warranty system. Definitely check these out. I think that this limb driven drop away is the way to go on any bow. And we can talk more about that later. So let's get right into it here. So there's a few tools you're going to need for this. Beyond obviously the arrow rest, you're going to want an arrow. If you don't already have these are a crucial piece to any bow shop. This is the level that you mount on your string, and you can get 2 axes of leveling out of this, and then this is one that clips on to your arrow so that you can figure out if your arrow rest is level or not. And so those are both really important and non-expensive, so definitely have 1 or 2 sets of those on hand. You're going to need 2 sets of Allen keys, or 1 set of Allen keys but another Allen key for your other limb bolt. We're going to show you why in a sec, but it's crucial that you have 2 limb bolt sized Allen keys, and then you're going to need a long rubber band. So before we start, I haven't even looked really at this arrow rest much, so let's break it open here and see what we got. So right off the bat, I can see that this is a really nice clean system. It doesn't have an arm that you normally would have to mount to the burger buttonholes. It's just very sleek and refined, and I'm excited to put it on. Little bag of accessories here. Let's see what we got. So what we have here is, this is a shelf pad. So this would go on your bow's shelf on the riser. It acts as a kind of a silencing mechanism so that when you're walking and trying to be quiet, your arrow's not rattling around on the shelf. And then it has this little notch for your arrow to sit in. You can absolutely use these. I have a different method that I like to use, which I'll show you, but I keep those. I've got a drawer full of them. This is the classic arrow rest bolt that would go into your burger buttonhole. Again, I'm not going to use this, but it's good to have those because they rust out. This is just D-loop material. This is what's going to actually make the arm of your arrow rest drive. So this will be attached from the arrow rest right here to either your top or bottom limb, whichever you prefer. I like to go, as I'm sure you can tell by now, all blue, so I got my own. I'll keep that for tying D-loops in the future. And then this is an important little piece. This is going to stick on your top or bottom limb, and that's where you're going to tie the top side or bottom side, depending which limb you choose to go with. That's where you're going to tie the other end of the D-loop material so that it doesn't slide around, and that it has a firm, kind of sticky place to sit on your limb. So the first thing you want to do is have your bow roughly level. You can check that with this piece here. It just clips onto your string like this, and then you can just kind of manipulate your vise until you have it level roughly in both ways. But like, this isn't crucial right now while we're just setting up the arrow rest, but it's nice to have a bit of a baseline setting that you know is close to accurate. Tighten everything down here. So if you're using the integrate mounting system, it is simply a dovetail that's going to slide onto here. If you're using more of a traditional setup that would mount into the burger buttonhole, the arrow rest is going to have an arm that sticks out, and you'll just put it here and get that bolt in there. Get that bolt in there loosely, just so that it's attached, so that you can start to make your adjustments. So on the Integrate mounting system, this is my dovetail here, and I can see that there's a bolt right here which is going to allow that dovetail to open up. So I'm going to loosen off that bolt. So I'm just going to take that, for me it's my right side of the dovetail because I'm right-handed. That's the fixed side, and I'm going to just clip it on to that outside of the bow on that dovetail mount here. And if you want to get a better look, you can see this is just a really clean dovetail mounting plate. So I'm going to clip that side in and just hold it in place. I'm going to loosen out the bolt on the other side until there's enough room that I can slide the other dovetail portion over the mount, and then I'm just going to tighten it down enough to hold it in place. This isn't set, obviously. I just want it in place. So now that that's on there, I'm going to snap an arrow into the system here. And what I'm doing is I'm going to get right at eye level and see that that arrow is perfectly in line with those burger buttonholes, or just on the top side of them, exactly as you can see here. Clearly it's not crazy off balance, it's fairly leveled, which is a great starting point, and it's actually about right where I want it to be. When in doubt, it's better to go on the high side rather than the low side so that you avoid clearance issues. But even just by sheer luck, the way that I mounted this system just to get it on there is really close, and I think I'm actually just going to go with it. So I like the way that that's sitting. Take one last look here. If anything, it might be just a touch high, but I can tell that the way I've mounted the rest is going to work. That small adjustment can easily be made with the micro adjust pieces here. So I'm going to go in and tighten down that bolt, because now I do not want that arrow rest to move. So this differs slightly from the burger buttonhole method, because when you're mounting with the burger buttonhole, there is no up or down. I have a dovetail here. I could literally slide my arrow rest up or down. What you're looking for on the burger button system is for the rest to just be level, right? Because if you only have it in there by one bolt, there is a pivot point and you want that to be level. Some of the higher end rests will actually come with a level. So all you would do is level your bow using the tool, get that level and bolt it down. Now there will be some forward and backward movement available to you. Now you want that rest to be as close to the riser as possible. The riser is the spine of your bow, and you want everything super close to the riser, which is why this Integrate mounting system is really cool, because it literally mounts to the riser. So now that I have that, I'm gonna pop my arrow back in, and we're gonna see just how level this actually is. Now for this part, it's good to use the arrow that you're gonna be shooting, because smaller diameter or bigger diameter arrows will level a little bit differently. So I'm gonna verify that my bow is leveled, which it is perfect. And then I'm gonna pop my arrow level on. So this tells me exactly at my arrow is just a touch high, like we thought. So I need to move it down. So on this system, it's just a bolt here, which you loosen off. And then I have a micro adjust screw, which allows me to just ever so slightly move that arrow rest down. And because the whole system comes loose when I loosen off this bolt, I have to tighten it back up after my adjustment to check my level. And it's close, but it just needs to go a little bit more. And what I'm looking for is that this bubble on the front is perfectly level. Again, just needs a little more adjustment. That's why I really like these micro adjust systems. Micro adjust on an arrow rest is an amazing thing, especially when you get to shooting broadheads. So now it's bang on. I can see that that level is perfect. My bow is still leveled. So this is perfectly set in terms of the up and down. Now what we need to do is the left and right, or what we call center shot. So my method for center shot is where we are requiring the 2 Allen keys, which will fit in your limb bolts, as well as the long elastic band. So first thing is just make sure that the bolts you just tightened down are in fact tight. We don't want this moving at all anymore unless we want it to. So let's figure out which Allen keys are going to fit my limb bolts. I prefer to just have loose ones for this, but looks like I don't have that option. So find a couple of Allen keys that are going to fit your limb bolts. So now you're going to take your long elastic band and wrap it from one to the other. And then just check and make sure that they're both very evenly coming off of those limb bolts. That's really important. This is where I sometimes prefer to use a smaller diameter arrow because you'll see the micro adjustments that need to be made better. But you're going to take that arrow, put it in your rest through the center of that elastic band and clip it onto your bow. So this is my direct view from behind the setup. You can see that the arrow, if it was centered, would be here, but when I let it go on the rest, it's clearly to the right. So that's just the adjustment we need to make. We want this arrow to come and be absolutely dead center. So I'm gonna loosen off my windage adjustment bolt, and then I have a micro adjust knob here, which allows me to move that towards level. Let's get you a better view there. It was like way out here before, so I'm just twisting it until it comes dead center there. Now keep in mind, there's always a little bit of variation in this method because you can have a twist one way or another in the elastic band, but just get it so that to your eye, it truly is dead center, and then any micro adjustments to that you can't see with just due to the twist of the elastic band can be fixed during paper tuning. So you can see here straight down the pipe, I got my arrow is perfectly in line with my string, which is perfectly dead center between those elastic bands. You can't even see my arrow, so I know that that's good to go. And I'm going to tighten that bolt back up. So if you were doing a setup on like a hostage style rest or a whisker biscuit rest, this would be it for you. This would be it. You've got center shot, you've got leveled. 9 times out of 10 when I go to paper tune after center shot and leveling, my very first shot is a bullet hole. It's actually quite rare that it's not. But because this is a limb driven rest, the arm obviously has to be attached to something which will allow it to go up and down. So that's what we got to do next. So what I'm going to do now is take that little rubber kind of spiky piece that they gave me, and that's going to go on whichever limb you're choosing to run your cable off of. I'm going to go off my bottom limb. So on some bow systems, you got to be careful just based on spacing between your cam and your limb. If you run a cable through there, it can get a little bit tight, and you don't want things to get too tight. I have plenty of room on this Bowtech here, so having the cable come closer to the end of the limb is better because that's the most reactive part of your limb. It's the part that has the most movement, so it'll allow your arrow rest to stay up for as long as possible while your arrow is launching off of it, and you'll have a faster arrow speed before the arm drops away, which obviously tends to greater accuracy. So I'm going to pop that sticker cover off there, and I'm going to put this pretty close, probably 1.5 inches away from my back of my limb there, and press that down really good. Now what I need to do is tie in this end of my D-loop material to the limb around that little piece we just put on. This is somewhat of a pain, but I'll show you guys how to do it. So basically the way this is going to work here is this is a long, like probably 2.5 foot strip of D-loop material, and I've mushroomed the end just like I'm doing a standard D-loop. So you're just going to take that end and tie in basically like a square knot, like that, and then another one on top. There's a lot of ways to do this. That's just a really simple one, because when you cinch it up with that mushroom, it actually comes out looking like one end of a D-loop. and that's it. That can't go anywhere. So then you've got that cinched down. You can pull as hard as you want on that, make sure it doesn't come out. It's going to be absolutely crucial to your bow working effectively. And then just for the ease of feeding this through that pulley system there, I'm going to just kind of give myself a point to work with on the end. Now I'm going off the bottom limb, so that means I have to go through this little pulley here that's on this system. So you can see I just burned that end and kind of rounded it out so that I could easily do this, but it's just simply gonna slide through there. And now this piece that's come out here is gonna wrap around this bolt right here, which is directly attached to your arm. You can see how that works. And I'm gonna hold that really tight. I mean, not crazy tight because you're pulling directly on your arrow rest, but tight enough to hold that arm down. This is a point where it's nice to have somebody here who can just hold that down, or I've actually seen people just take a little clip and clip that down, which is a really good idea. I wish I had a clip. And you wanna get this pretty tight because this is basically the lifeline of your arrow rest. So that's it, your arrow rest is now installed. Be aware that the first couple times you draw this might loosen off and you just have to retighten the cable using this bolt. But that's really it. With this end here, I've seen some pretty fancy tie-ins down here and stuff. I don't really worry about all that. I just cut it off so that there's enough for me to grab onto, but not enough that it's ever going to get in my way. And I'll cut it off and just mushroom the end off, and it looks pretty clean that way. You can, if you want to do a fancy tie-in or whatever, you sure can, but that's really all you have to do with that. So then it also is not going to take you long to notice that when you put an arrow in here, it's now just rubbing on the shelf, potentially rubbing off the finish, and that's noisy. We don't want that. But like I said, I don't really like those rubber pads. They're just not my favorite. So what I'll do is I take these strips of felt. These are actually just extra strips of the felt that goes on these Vapor Trail arms. So I just buy a bunch of extra of those. And what I'm gonna do is put it just on that front edge up to about here. And it's a really good adhesive, so that'll never come off. I'm gonna do that there. And then I'll also put a strip on the side. So I just measured it out and cut it to the length that I want. Make sure that shelf is clean. If you're doing this on a bow that isn't brand new, you should wipe it down with some, even Windex or rubbing alcohol. And just really carefully, I want this perfectly along that front edge of the shelf, just like that. And once you press it in, make sure you're set and you're happy with where it is, because it's not really reusable. And then I'll take another strip, which I've measured out for this side edge. I'm going to apply that, and if you do it nicely, you can actually make it look like both pieces are connected, and it looks really clean. So you can see it looks pretty clean. And this is really cool because when I stick an arrow in here, now it's quiet. It'll get quieter with time too as that kind of wears in, but anywhere that my arrow is on that shelf, it's just felt. That is obviously way quieter, and I like this better than that rubber pad because there's just nothing impeding my veins or anything coming off my shelf. I want this to be as wide open as possible for my arrow to get max clearance. So that's how you install a drop away style arrow rest. You can go ahead and test it now. When you draw this, the flex of the limb is going to, as it comes in like this, create slack on this cable, which is going to lift your arm up. And then when you shoot your arrow, the limb snaps back and it'll drop out of the way perfectly in time to let your arrow clear without veins contacting anything. So your arrow rest is leveled and centered. This is all you need for paper tuning. Like I say, 9 times out of 10, if you've been really careful and diligent in the way you did this, you're probably going to shoot a bullet hole, given that your hand form is good, that you're not punching the trigger, and that your arrows are spined, of course. But as far as arrow rest setup goes, you've done everything you can. One thing I will mention as well about the limb driven versus the cable driven system is that There's two reasons I really prefer the limb-driven system over cable-driven. Limb-driven systems will keep your arrow rest up longer than a cable-driven system. Your arrow has more speed before that arm drops away, so you end up with a more accurate arrow launch. And the other reason is you don't need a press or anything to install this cable. So if you were ever to cut this in the field, I can replace this. It's a pain, but I can replace it doing just what I showed you. On the cable-driven systems, you can have a clip attached to your cable, which allows you to do the same thing. I don't really like that method. I prefer to go between the cable, but to get into that cable, you need a bow press. So this is a bit more of a field safe or backcountry bow hunting safe technique. So at this point, I'm excited. I haven't shot this bow. I'm going to take a few shots. I want to help my strings settle out. It's a good idea to check the timing marks and whatnot, and if you have a draw board, check the timing marks to make sure nothing's crazy before you actually draw the bow. You don't want to be drawing it with one cable, you know, an inch shorter than the other. But that's really it. I'm going to take a few shots and just kind of feel my way through this bow. I'm also going to put my stabilizer on right now, but you do not need a tutorial on how to do that. So now that you can shoot your bow a little bit and get those strings to settle into the cam tracks, and just enjoy having your brand new bow finally be shootable. And then we're going to go ahead and time it before we put the sight on, because it's just easier to do with less on the bow. So tune into part 4 for cam timing.